This is the Convene Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Convene Talk, where we discuss interesting stories that appear in our popular newsletter, News Junkie. My name is Magdalena Tanasova, Digital Media Editor at Convene. Michelle, this week, the story is your pick, so I actually made that rhyme. So tell us a bit about that topic.
Thanks, Maggie. This is Michelle Russell, Editor-in-Chief. I picked the Harvard Business Review story, which was called 9 Trends That Will Shape Work in 2024 and Beyond. And usually I'm a little jaded about trend stories because either to me, they feel like they're, well, duh, kind of trends, like we've all seen them coming. Or somebody takes something that happened somewhere, one instance, and they make it into a trend. But I thought these were all really, really solid. And I'm only going to talk about the one that really struck me as being one, I would say, well, I did not see that one coming. So there's some really cool ones, like 4-day work weeks will move from radical to routine. I would love to see that happen. The one that really struck me as being, I would say, not a stretch, but something that is sort of what we have been talking about, but not really pinpointing this exact thing, which is that employee conflict resolution will be a must-have skill for managers. And the reason why this is a trend, they're saying, is that these kinds of conflicts between employees are going to be at an all-time high due to various crises, including geopolitical issues, labor strikes, climate change, pushback to DEI efforts, and upcoming elections for half the globe. So it's not just here in North America where we're going to be polarized, it's in other parts of the world. And that just spoke to me about our cover story that we just completed, which is on the importance of listening and how you can foster listening not only in the workplace, but at events. And also this video I had seen about the best way to kind of win an argument is not to provide facts, according to a study at UCLA, in which they wanted to sort of convince parents that vaccinating their children is really important. And instead of focusing on the big perception that parents don't want to vaccinate their kids because the perception is that there are links to autism, instead of refuting that with facts, they focused on what is the outcome that you want, which is you want your children to be healthy. So they showed what measles looks like, because we've all kind of forgotten what measles looks like because it's been almost eradicated. So to me, that just said that is one way to, in organizations, it seems like an easy fix because we are all supposed to be working towards a particular goal if you work for an association or a corporation. So if you keep focusing on that rather than on why a particular argument is right or wrong, you're probably going to have more of a positive outcome. So that was my take. I'm interested in hearing, Maggie, what was the trend that resonated with you?
I have to say, I'll stick with your choice. Conflict resolution was definitely a surprise, but it made me think of Riaz McGee, and I do hope I pronounce his last name correct. He was a keynote at the 2023 PCMA Foundation Partnership Summit, and I've seen a probably oldish video of him speaking about argument resolution as well. And he says there that what we need to start with is actually agreeing on the common grounds on both sides. So yes, we clearly do not see the issue the same way, but there is some groundwork there that works for both sides. And just starting from this point on makes the whole argument much easier to resolve. Just keeping in mind that, yes, we do have a commonality here. And what he says is that both sides, after all, are equally 100% responsible to be in this situation. And I love that there is no 80-20%, there's 100% responsibility on both sides. And definitely the issues that they outlined in the HBR article, they are very pertinent and people disagree more and more. So I agree with their trend, and I hope it becomes a trend where managers really focus on making conflict resolution less painful for their employees and their team. And the other thing that I picked on was Gen AI and how it probably has inflated expectations. And I'm not sure if they're inflated. And I'm currently battling with this idea of the data shows that people using AI do perform better at their work. And there were various studies with Wharton and BCG, and there's knowledge work there, and consultants who used AI performed much better. There was a different study, again, that Wharton did, and elite students from a very elite universities, how they performed in terms of generating ideas versus AI. And then AI beat them every time. So that was curious to me that, okay, AI clearly has an advantage to our work, but why is this not shown so clearly in our industry? And I'm starting to think that maybe the adoption rate in our industry is not as good as in other industries. And maybe that's why, we're seeing this continuous trend that AI is rather a fad and it's not really helping event managers perform better. So I'm curious to see how this will reflect, in the year to come. Kurt, how about you?
Hi, this is Kurt Wagner. I'm the digital editor, and I was going to comment on something Michelle said, but now I want to comment on something you said, and I'm probably going to forget the other part. But I just wrote us something about Sean Kanungo, the innovation expert who talked at Convening Leaders 24, and he talked about some study that said AI hasn't reached or has peaked already. Like the importance of AI has peaked already or something like that. And I think that sort of goes along with what you're disagreeing with, is that I don't think it has either yet. What they might be about the backlash might be that, when I started to play around with it, it took a while for me to get to where I could actually get something out of it that I wanted to, because you got to sort of learn how to work with it and ask the right questions and that kind of thing. So maybe that's what they're talking about, but that seems to be like not a big deal. So yeah, I don't know that I agree with that trend as much either. And then Michelle, what you were talking about, conflict resolution, all that whole thing made me think of, again, convening leaders, the Clintons talking about the loss of civility in the government and politics, and even just everything we see now. Like, you see newscasters on television doing an interview and they're arguing with the guest who they're speaking to, who they're interviewing, and even our politicians are sniping at each other, which I guess has always been that way, but it seems to be more, quote unquote, hateful now. Like they're really, it's not about political divide. It's more about, I don't really like you, that kind of thing. It just seems like we've lost a lot of that. So yeah, I think conflict resolution will be a huge thing. I like what you wrote about that. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about that I thought was cool was the creative benefits to address the costs of work. If you are making people come back to the office, then trying to help cover those things that are pain points for them to get back to the office. Childcare, which I've always thought childcare should be a thing that big companies at least should offer, and help with public transportation or whatever type of transportation you take, paying for that kind of stuff. And also the flexibility with, as we were talking about earlier on here, but the flexibility with start times and end times, and being able to go to a doctor's appointment or something like that, like those kind of things. So I think that's cool. A lot of places do that now, but there's a lot that don't. And so people aren't able to do those things. And also, I think if you're made to dress up at something, then you should get paid a extra bump for your clothes that you're supposed to wear, especially if it's clothes that you would never wear anywhere else. But my 2 cents. Barbara, it looks like you have something to say.
I do. And it's like an embarrassment of riches. We keep adding more topics to the table. But what I'd like to respond to, and I totally was skeptical as well about the AI reaching, kind of deflating. I think the studies that I've looked at that show the increase in productivity and the increase in outcomes, they're planned interventions in work. It's not just somebody off on their own trying to figure out how is this going to help me do better. It's like the one that I thought was just so interesting was like how it helps people who are customer service experts. And it used recordings of the most successful people in resolving conflicts on the phone and analyzed what they were doing with AI and gave prompts to the newest members of the team, and their productivity soared. So that is not just somebody experimenting on their own with ChatGPT. I mean, I think all of us have had an encounter with, this is the limits of this because this is clearly wrong when they're trying to do something with ChatGPT. So the thing about some of these trends are they are predicated on behavior in the past. And I do think that these breakthroughs in AI are going to break some of those models. What is going to happen is people that think, I don't have to ever look at another spreadsheet, or I'm not going to have to think about anything, then they're going to be disappointed. But if they have a strategic way of using it and a collaborative way of using it, I don't think it's going to disappoint. I was listening to Marketplace in the car last night, and they were talking about how all of the indicators about work at home are not there. The commercial real estate market is not recovered at all in cities. Some of the outlying indicators like services to buildings, the people who would go in and water plants, and those businesses have not recovered. So I just think it's still very much unknown where that's going to be. I know I live in the Bay Area, and Google is closing its childcare center. And I don't think it's because Google is cutting back on benefits to employees. I think it's because the remote workers, it's because people are not going to the Google campus as much. And I don't know that. I'm speculating. But I just think so much remains to be seen from work at home. What I think has changed is that people are counting the cost and they're counting the benefits. They're seeing the benefits of flexibility with their other responsibilities at home. And they're just counting the cost and wondering, like, who is responsible for this, or how does this fit into my compensation? And I guess one other thing I'll say is that public transportation, at least in the Bay Area, has not recovered. It's like there's not as many trains. There's much more people that don't feel safe on public transportation. So they're crossing the bridges in the area, and that adds time. And so you can't really go back to what was happening before the pandemic and base your expectations on that, because things have changed. And Casey, what are your thoughts about this?
This is Casey Gale, managing editor. I wanted to go back to a trend that Michelle highlighted at the beginning, the 4-day work week, and how that may become more normalized in the near future. When we did our annual forecast in November 2023, I actually wrote a little bit about this for the future of work. There was a study done by the University of Cambridge and Boston College. In the UK, they did a 4-day week global run where a bunch of companies tested the 4-day work week, and they had amazing results. 71% of employees reported feeling less burnt out. 39% of employees felt less stressed. 65% experienced a reduction in sick days taken. So there's a lot of evidence that, kind of to your point, Barbara, that flexibility really does help in terms of people weighing the cost of, what their schedule is to their personal life and their work-life balance, and encourages people to stay in their job. So I definitely see that as becoming more normalized soon, hopefully.
I was thinking how it was interesting in the article that this is the 9th trend, that traditional stereotypes of career paths will collapse in face of workforce change. So it said that traditional career paths where employees rise up the ranks and retire at the peak of their career are going away. Some aren't retiring at all, or they're doing some sort of career shift or break. And then it also pointed to some research from Pew Research that Americans age 65 and older, 19%, twice as many as 35 years ago, are continuing to work. So that's pretty interesting. And then it's also pointing to some research that mid-career, people are embracing less traditional employment models. So freelance, they're not sticking with the same companies. I thought that was interesting because that's actually something we explored back in August 2023. And this was our cover story, is the talent shortage. But one of the stories that we included in that cover package talked about how more and more people, especially people from this industry, right after the pandemic, started shifting to less traditional roles. We interviewed Tracy Judge, who is the founder of Soundings, which is sort of like a freelance marketplace for the events industry. She talked about how they've seen a huge increase in interest. We talked to her a little bit about how, this is a great option for people. They can potentially make just as much money in a traditional role. So I thought it was really interesting that we were kind of on top of that trend way before HBR was. But it's definitely showing that it's not a trend, and that perhaps this kind of non-traditional career path, regardless of what age you're at, maybe that's not a trend. Maybe that's just the new normal.
Thank you all for another great discussion. And a quick mention that all these studies that we mentioned will appear in the show notes. And remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time.